Hello, welcome to your first summer pre-calc video. My name is Mrs. Simpson and I will be teaching pre-calculus at Bloom. And this fall of 2020, teaching pre-calc at Trail will be Miss Popovic and Miss Harris. We're going to ask you just to watch these lovely videos. We'll have a few problems at the end of each one that you may choose to do or not do. It's all on you, but we'd request that you would watch these videos because this is review material of what you are supposed to know and remember, and we know you don't for the most part. First off, magnitude is an important concept in math. Sadly, in most math classes, it isn't mentioned or only slightly mentioned. It is a word that should be used because it deals in the real world concepts in science and other fields, and this is the word they use. Magnitude is always positive or zero. It is a real world concept. We will introduce it in relationship to the distance between two numbers. Now, the distance between two numbers is a magnitude relationship and hence must be positive or zero. So it's not going to be a respecter of subtraction order. You have to know to take large minus small, or if you don't know because the quantities are unknown, you still have to end up with a positive or a zero for your solution or answer. So the difference, since it must be positive or zero, and you might not know what your quantities are, brings us back to the 6th grade order of operation concept, absolute value. But before we broach this concept of absolute value, let's look at some vocabulary review that we need to know. We will begin considering the domain being integers. When I talk about negative, you know you're going on the number line, you're heading left, -1, -2, -3, all the way to negative infinity. Here's one that gets people. Non-positive means I can't be positive. What does that mean? You're negative, or you're that special number that's neither negative or positive called zero. So you're zero in all the negatives. Positive means you're starting with just 1, 2, 3, 4. You need to know. This means natural and counting. Non-negative. You see the word negative and you're trying to put negative signs in, but what does it mean? Not negative. Anything but negative. So 0 is not negative, and the positives are not negative, and this is what we call the whole numbers. Now let's define these using inequalities with the real numbers as a domain. You can pick whatever letter you want. I just use the letter X. It's the standard. So negative says, oh, I'm less than 0. Non-positive said, oh, I've got to be negative, but I can also be 0. Positive, I can't be 0 and I can't be negative. Non-negative, I can't be negative at all, so I can be 0 or positive. Now, with this in mind, let's jump over to absolute value. Here is the best definition of absolute value, where they give it to you as negative numbers, 0, and positive numbers, because we do have 3 types of numbers when we look at our number line, and we're talking about real numbers. So what does absolute value tell you to do? It says if you're a negative number, negate it. That is, make it positive. If you're 0, it stays 0, and if you're positive, you stay what you are. Putting it in words pictorially, negative says take the opposite, which means negate. It means you were negative. Positive, here's the symbols for positive, and you keep. Now, absolute value is a magnitude, which means it's not negative. Distance between A and B is not negative. You aren't sure, or should I write A minus B or B minus A? Because I cannot respect subtraction order. I always need big minus small, and since I'm not sure when I don't give you actual numbers, I must use the absolute value. So the definition of distance is the absolute value of the difference of two numbers. That means we don't have to worry about order. Now I tell you 3 and 9, you're going to tell me 6, but notice, order doesn't matter if I have an absolute value. Both of these give me 6. You could say -4 minus 5, 5 minus -4, nobody cares because it's the absolute value. It means it is the positive difference or 0. -2 and -8, same things. A lot of you would say -8 minus -2 and think that you're going to end up with a +6 because you're turkeys, because you think -8 is bigger when it's actually smaller. But anyway, those are the examples. So now we come into this example, still connecting with absolute value and inequalities, of the battle over the words at least versus at most. Over the years, I've been amazed that this seems to be a big confusion for students. But when I put it into a real life situation, there seems to be very little confusion. But as a math concept, wow. So, for example, I tell you, he must be 2 years old to attend. And you go, no trouble. That means 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 2 or older. I tell you, riders must be at most 8 years old to enter. So that means you got to be a little kid. You got to be 8 or 7 or 6 down to a newborn, 8 or younger. So what does at least mean? It gives you the minimum starting point. It says you start here at the minimum amount and you are going to get more and more. You're getting larger because at least 2 means 2 or more. What does at most mean? It's giving you the maximum amount. You're stuck. I can't go any bigger than this. So you have your maximum amount or less. As you're going to find out in these videos, we're going to take a tour from the living room to the dining room because I got to prop these things up wherever I can. So, now when we use inequalities and I look at this situation and I talk about x is at most -4, what does that mean? -4 is as big as I can be, so that implies my x, or the rest of the numbers, must be smaller. -4 is the max. I'm smaller. -4 or smaller. X is at least 10 means x is greater than or equal to 10. That means 10 is the minimum and I can only go up when I do it. X must be at least -1. So at means equal, least is minimum, but at means equal, most means the max. So I get the inequality or squeeze play. -1 is less than or equal to x is less than or equal to 3. Now, many times you are given a range of distances, such as, 2,000 feet plus or minus 10 feet. They give you an error that you can have. So the actual value has to be within 10 feet of 2,000. This translates into I can be 2,000 minus 10, which would be 1,190 feet. So I have to be at least that. That's the min I can be. What's the most I can be? 2,000 plus 10, which is 2,010 feet is our max, and it's at most. So where will my answers be? Somewhere between those two numbers would be legitimate. Now, mathematically, when we see this, our brain should come to the fact that it's an absolute value since it is measuring a magnitude. Magnitudes are distance, length, width, weight, height. Just think of whatever you can measure. We're going to assume that x represents the actual magnitude that we need. So what do I do when I write an inequality? Here is my actual value. Here is what I want. So I have to create its difference. So I'm finding its distance, in this case, a length or a height or a width, depending on what I'm talking about there. And I'm telling you, 10 is as far away as I can go. So this is an at least and at most situation with my error. And so you see I'm setting up the same inequality I did before. Now just think, when when a product is made, there are strict parameters to which we have to do that. I wrote strict that way instead of with the T. Pretend like there's a T there in place to ensure that you get the amount of product for which you're paying within reason. So say that you buy 12 ounces of soda. The manufacturer is going to label it as 12 ounces, and you have to be reasonably sure that you're getting the 12 ounces of soda. So therefore, he may set the error at maybe 0.1 ounce, which says that when you buy 12 ounces of soda, or let's say what other quantity you want, that you're reasonably sure you're pretty close to 12. And so you say, well, here's my actual amount minus 12. It must be there. So for my inequality, that was supposed to have a plus 0.1 there, and I forgot it. And so I'm going to be between 11.9 and 12.1. So the minimum amount I can have, the maximum amount I can have, and I have an at least and at most situation. And so I am going to get reasonably 12 ounces. So, when dealing with medication, the protocol standards are much stricter. Say you have 10 milligrams of a med, the restriction would probably be within 0.005 milligrams, maybe even a stricter restriction. And so here is what I'm told I can have. The setup is, well, this is my pill minus 10, and I don't know how that erased. Sorry, I had to get a marker out. It's less than or equal to 0.5. So again, I'm going to subtract and add. And so when I take my medication, my bloodstream, to keep the amounts reasonable, is going to be within guidelines. That ends what you needed to learn and review and see. Now, if you want to practice some questions, I have created 10 questions for practice. K is at least negative 20. M is at most 10. The set of real numbers that are at least negative 6 and at most 5. J is non-positive. N is non-negative. I have some that deal with the absolute value notation again that we'll describe, but now there's situations. So find the distance between x and 4. Find the distance between x and negative 8. The distance between x and 4 is at most 12. The distance between x and 8 is at least 5. We didn't talk about that. And then the manufacturer produces 1/4 inch screws. The error allowed in each screw is to be labeled as 1/4 inch screw is 1/100 of an inch. So I want you not only to write the absolute value situation, but I wanted you to continue on with the writing the regular inequality with the max and the min. Now, you don't have to do these, but I would suggest you can go back and you can pause the video, look at the questions, back up and then look at them and then do the answers. So here are the answers. When I say K is at least negative 20, that means K is bigger than or equal to negative 20. M is at most 10. That said M is less than or equal to 10. I tell you the set of real numbers is at least negative 6 and at most 5. I'm between and or equal to negative 6 and 5. I tell you J is non-positive. That means it's 0 or negative. I tell you that N is non-negative. That means it's 0 or positive. I asked you to find the distance between x and 4. Yes, you could write 4 minus x, but I'm going to tell you everybody's going to write x minus 4 on an answer key. The difference between x and negative 8, and they will go with the x plus 8 on the inside as the answer. The distance between x and 4 is at most 12. That means 12 is the max. The distance between x and 8 is at least 5, and I didn't do that example, but at least means that's a min and it has to be bigger. And then the screw situation, 0.25 plus or minus a hundredth would be my actual size minus the 25 hundredths. Has to be less than 1/100th. So I set up the minus 0.01 plus 0.01. So when I buy a 1/4 inch screw, I know at least, at minimum, it's going to be 24 hundredths and at most 26 hundredths, and that would satisfy the screw specifications of the manufacturer.